Talk on the Braden Surprenant Show.
With the stars that they have signed under contract, you can't just punt on a Manny Machado prime year.
Sports radio catered to the ones who call America's finest city home.
Braden totally knows his stuff. He's ready for the next step. That guy is good.
The Braden Surprenant Show starts now.
But I think Braden's one of the up-and-coming young stars in the media game in San Diego.
Here's your host, Braden Surprenant.
Good morning, San Diego. Welcome into another edition of the Braden Surprenant Show. We are live, we are local each and every Sunday morning from 8 to 10 on San Diego's number one sports station, 97.3 The Fan. It's fun to be here with you on this Sunday morning. And it's always better on a Sunday morning to come on the airwaves after a Padres victory. A Padres 3-2 victory last night over the Colorado Rockies. A ball game in which the Padres went down 1-0 after the first three frames of the game, or should I say the first three innings of the game. And Martin Perez making his Padres debut yesterday for San Diego after being acquired by the Padres from the Pirates to help out in that rotation. And that's kind of where I want to start with today. We're going to talk a lot about the trade deadline and recapping it on this show. I know we had that throughout the week on all our other shows. This is our first time to kind of recap the deadline. We were on last week when the Padres acquired Jason Adam and start the bullpen piece for San Diego now that actually pitched yesterday and got the win. A 1 inning, 1 hit, no runs, no walks, and a punch out. You got to see Tanner Scott for the first time last night. He gave up a run with 2 strikeouts, gave up 1 bad pitch on a bomb, and then Robert Suarez closed it down. But I mean, last night showed the power of that bullpen. Obviously, not completely lights out as you would like, but that's going to take some time with guys coming into new spots. But last night was a night you got to see some of these guys for the first time. Let's start with Martin Perez. Perez is a guy that has had success in Major League Baseball, has battled some injuries in Major League Baseball, and is now getting back to, hopefully form for the San Diego Padres after having relatively a good time with the Texas Rangers for 2 years. I mean, for the 2 years he was with Texas, he was 12-8 with a 2.89 ERA. He won 10 games last year in 2023. Obviously, that was a year in which the Rangers won the World Series. Didn't pitch as well as he did in 2022 when he was an All-Star. Was 10-4 with a 4.45 ERA. Gave the Rangers a ton of innings. And then so far this year, hadn't really had hadn't had too much success with the Pirates, but only had thrown 83 innings with Pittsburgh as he's been battling some injuries. Last night, good line for Martin Perez and what could be a nice addition for the San Diego Padres in their starting rotation, something that obviously they want to try to fill the void and keep being able to fill some spots until some guys get back. I mean, it's an interesting group, this Padres starting rotation, and how they're going to have to navigate the last 50 games. Padres have 50 games left in the season. They're 60-52, 4.5 out of the division, half-game lead on the final wild card spot in the number 2 spot, and only a game behind Atlanta in that process. But the hardest thing for the Padres right now is being able to finish the season and make the playoffs, because they have built themselves very much so a tournament-level ball club. They have a tournament team right now and ready for the postseason. They built up on bullpen arms, which could be used a lot in the playoffs, because in the postseason, you got these days off in between games and in between series where you don't need necessarily, you got guys getting rest all the time. So that's one way to navigate the playoffs, is through bullpen help. But until you make it to the playoffs, you got to need some guys in the starting rotation to eat some innings for you so you can keep that bullpen fresh. And I think Martin Perez did a good job of that last night. 6 innings, 1 earned run, 3 hits, no walks, 7 punch-outs. Gave up the 1 home run to Goodman in the 3rd inning on an 0-1 count, with nobody on and 1 out. I mean, that was those are going to happen when he's your 4th or 5th starter in the rotation, right? But he did his job. He got you to the 6th innings. You went to the bullpen. Bullpen shut it down. It was the first time seeing Tanner Scott in a Padres uniform. He gives up 1 home run. It's going to happen with guys moving around. It's a lot of change in their life. But the Padres got the victory last night, which is actually impressive against a team like the Rockies because they haven't really been able to do that too much. The Rockies have been the thorn in the Padres' side more times than not, and a lot of it has to do with their starting pitching. I saw it posted yesterday by Chris Ello from our afternoon show on Gwynn and Chris. He posted on X. Note to the Padres, the Colorado Rockies pitching this season at Petco Park. This is going into last night. At Petco Park, the Rockies are 4-0 with a 2.25 ERA. Everywhere else, they're 37-70 with a 5.59 ERA. That's remarkable. That's remarkable, the difference between the Rockies pitching at Petco Park compared to the Rockies pitching everywhere else. Everywhere else, including Coors Field. Apparently have found a home at Petco Park, the Colorado Rockies pitching staff, being the 4-0 that they are. Padres now, after the win, have put themselves 4.5 games behind LA for the division. They're a half-game lead in the wild card in the number 2 spot, as I mentioned, but in a good spot, but need to be able to handle business today against the Colorado Rockies. Today's show, we're going to talk a lot of different things about that. We're going to recap the trade deadline for San Diego, how it impacts them moving forward. Obviously, they gave up a lot of young talent for some of these bullpen arms. Tanner Scott is a rental. Everybody else is part of the team for a couple of years of control. I don't think Martin Perez might be a rental as well. But I think the Padres did an outstanding job at the trade deadline. It's kind of a twofold thing, right? Because everybody, how do you think the Padres did the trade deadline? Well, it's kind of a double-edged sword because the Padres made their major league team better. That's not even a question. They've made the major league club in the organization better. They have made their bullpen arguably one of the best bullpens, at least with the 4-headed monster in the back. And I know, statistically last night it wasn't, completely lights out, but it's going to be probably going into the postseason, again, if they make it, which I think they will. It's going to be one of the best bullpens, going into the postseason we've seen in the last couple of years. I mean, and in fact, ESPN reported it after the trade happened. One of their writers goes, I can't remember a bullpen going into the postseason that has had 4 great guys in the back end of that bullpen like the San Diego Padres have. So with that said, and where the Padres are at the trade deadline, I think the Major League Club got better. Now, from a standpoint of trading away a lot of prospects, they did trade away a lot of prospects. If you look at the MLB.com's top 30 prospect list for the Padres exiting spring training, most of those guys have departed and are on other teams. They kept the top 2. I mean, the top 2 guys are still part of the organization. I think that's a win. And I think the guys that they have parted ways with are not players that are going to be impact players for the Padres in the next couple of years, at least during this short window. So I think that is a win. But in terms of in the 3, 4, 5 years down the road, when you're paying Manny Machado $39 million and you're paying Xander $25 million and Tatis $25 million and Musgrove $12 and Darvish $15 and Jake Cronenworth $12 and Robert Suarez $8 if he doesn't opt out, you're going to need some young guys to offset some of those costs. And right now you don't have those guys. But A.J. Preller's now rebuilt the farm system at least 3 times. Done it at least 3 times where he's completely overhauled the thing. And it's been pretty crazy how much he's been able to do that. So, overall trade deadline, we're going to talk about this in our next segment. I think the Padres did a good job. I mean, it would have been better if you got to hang on to a couple of those arms, but I think the Padres might have a couple of plans in store for some of the young players that they had acquired. You know, more particularly in Hoeing, who they got from the Miami Marlins. He is a player that obviously is a swingman and has some years of control in which they think they might be able to turn into a starting pitcher. I mean, that might be part of the conversation during the offseason. Then all of a sudden, he becomes one of those guys in your future rotation. But I thought overall the Padres deadline was good. Hunt for October. Padres got 50 games left in the season. They have 19 games now against teams above 5. They have 19 games now against teams below 500, and they have 31 games against teams above 500 to finish the stretch. And this month of August is a little bit difficult on the sense that you do play some teams that are above 500 to finish out the rest of August. You got Pittsburgh twice, you got Minnesota, you got the Mets, you got St. Louis. All of those teams are battling for playoff spots. You have Tampa Bay, who is still above 500 by 2 games to finish out August. I don't know if they will be above 500 by the time you play them. I don't know what type of mindset they're going to be in. I don't know what type of ball club they're going to be at that time, but they are considered 3 of those 31 games against teams above 500. You got 3 series against Detroit. You got 3 series against Detroit and San Francisco, with 1 being here at home, and then 1 against San Francisco at home, and then 1 on the road. 6 more games against the Giants. Giants are technically, they're one of those teams that are below 500 by 2 games, but they're a team that is still competing for a playoff spot. You know, San Francisco might still think that they are in it at 4.5 games back out of a wild card spot. I would say they're in it. They've won 7 of the last 10 games. Playing Cincinnati this weekend, if they can get another win, take 2 out of 3, they're 1 game under 500, and they're right there within striking distance, and you got to deal with the Giants twice in the month of September. But who knows where they will be at by the time the Padres play them. And then to finish your last 4 series to finish the season, Houston battling for a playoff spot. The White Sox, I don't need to spend time on the White Sox. The White Sox are an anomaly in general. I'm going to get to them in a second. The Dodgers and the Arizona Diamondbacks both on the road. We've talked about this on this show. We've talked about this on Andy and Elston. That 3-game series in Arizona could be the difference between the Padres hosting a playoff game and going on the road for a playoff game. That could be the difference between the Padres making the playoffs and missing out on the playoffs. And those 6 games against LA and Arizona could be the difference between the Padres winning the division and the Padres not making the playoffs at all. With how close everything is in the National League West currently, and with how close everything is in the National League wild card currently, those 6 games could have a major impact on going from maybe having a first-round bye and winning the division to missing out on the playoffs altogether. It's so razor thin. It's funny, one of my coaches growing up when I played basketball, I still a good family friend. Him and his son and me have been longtime friends since kindergarten. He had this to say about the difference between great and elite is razor thin. And he used it in the context of athletes, right? I mean, the difference between an athlete that is at the top of his game in his sport at a professional level and an athlete that's sitting in AAA is razor thin. It could be his height, it could be his weight, it could be the way he does a couple of things, his statistics, how he's hitting, how he's fielding, how he's pitching, because everybody uses their own metrics to determine success, but it's razor thin. The same thing is said about Major League Baseball teams. I mean, if you look at professional sports teams in general, the difference between great and elite is razor thin. We've talked about this a lot. And every time, and it happens all the time. I'll see it in the chat on YouTube. People will call in. But when you talk about organizations and teams that are not doing well at a professional level, the excuse all the time is, well, they're professional athletes too. Like they're still a really good team. Like, yeah, in the grand scheme of things, yes. You know, there are players on the White Sox that are better than everybody else in the world. But they're not, living up to the expectation of success. Now, for them, it's a little bit different. They're not razor thin with everybody else. But it's the biggest reason why you have these teams that could go out there and beat up some of the best teams in Major League Baseball. I mean, the difference between the Rockies and the Padres is razor thin on their differences. A couple of players here and there, all of a sudden it's a different story. A couple of hits here and there, it's a different story. I mean, that's why the Rockies have had success against the Padres all year. They play them all the time. I think the best example of that is the National Football League. I mean, how many times you go on a Sunday and you see a team that's, in dead last in their division go out and hammer somebody in first place? It happens all the time. That's why they have the term any given Sunday. I mean, these teams are loaded with professional athletes and the most elite talent in the world. It's a razor margin between the good, the greats, and the elite. Let's talk about the White Sox for a second. Even the White Sox, and I'm going to talk out of both sides of my mouth right now, but even the White Sox, I just mentioned how it doesn't seem as razor thin. The White Sox have 27 wins this year. They're 27-86. They've lost 19 in a row. 19 in a row. Their organization is a disaster. I have had conversations with multiple people that have been part of that organization about how it's a disaster. Asking for more work is just like an insane ask to coaches. For hitters that want to go out there and get extra work in. It's apparently it's trying to get some BP and the coaching staff at the different levels of the White Sox. It pains them to have to do it. Pains them to have to do it. You got guys battling in the minor leagues asking for trades. I mean, it's just a terrible organization to be a part of right now. And I don't know how you fix that aside from maybe changing the ownership. So as much of a disaster the White Sox have been this year, currently are this season, with their 27 wins, they have 29 blown saves. 29 blown saves. 29 times this year, the Chicago White Sox have had a lead in a ball game, and they have lost it in the ninth inning. 29 times. If they have a good bullpen or a good closer, they're probably right around a competition position in the playoffs. 29 blown saves. That is unreal. I had to look it up again. That had to be a made up stat. There's no way they have blown 29 baseball games in the ninth inning. 29 saves. It's remarkable. Razor thin. I mean, let's think about from the perspective of the trade deadline. Everybody wanted the players on the White Sox. They wanted Garrett Crochet. They wanted Tommy Pham. They wanted Eloy Jimenez. They wanted Luis Robert Jr. I mean, they had guys there that teams wanted. They had Michael Kopech. I know he didn't start the season with the team because the Padres acquired him early, but Dylan Cease was a part of that team. 29 blown saves. If they just if half of those they end up winning. Just half of those they end up winning. They're up there with the Marlins and the Rockies, which seems like not a lot. But for the White Sox at 27 wins and a .239 winning percentage, that could go a long way. It's razor thin between the good and the elite. So when asked the question, and we're going to get to this later on, about can the Padres win the division, the answer to that with 4.5 games behind LA is absolutely yes. And I know, and here's the narrative, and I understand why people don't want to look at that yet. Because they are afraid of talking it up and having it not happen. I understand. That is 100% why Padres fans don't want to talk about it. And here's the deal. You know, people say this all the time. They go like, hey, look, 4.5 games back. That's not that far. They could totally pull it off. And the reaction is, well, we don't need the clubhouse. Who cares about the clubhouse? I'm not in the clubhouse. I don't need to worry about it. I can look ahead. I can look at the schedule ahead. I don't need to take it one game at a time. I'm a broadcaster. I'm a fan. I'm not in the clubhouse every day. Now, when I'm talking with the kids that I coach high school football with, yeah, we're taking one practice at a time, one game at a time. But as a fan, you know, if I was one of the parents, I could be like, hey, look, we got this team, this team, this team. We could probably do that, X, Y, Z. I always find it funny when people just don't get ahead of yourself. What I say and what you guys say out there about the team has no impact on what they do. It has zero impact on what they do. You could be superstitious about it and curses and all that stuff, you know, saying the guy's got a no-hitter, he's got a no-hitter. I try not to say that on air. I try to find different ways to say those things. But if you really think that the reason why some of these guys throw a no-hitter is because that nobody else in the world said that he had a no-hitter, come on. Come on. Padres have a real chance at winning the division. They have a real chance of beating the Los Angeles Dodgers for that division. They're 4.5 games back. I know you don't want to put the cart before the horse, but it's definitely plausible because, again, the margin is razor thin. How can the Padres do that? Well, it has a lot to do with the bullpen that they acquired. We're going to talk more about that and the trade deadline, how it worked out for San Diego, and how it impacts them moving forward. Short-term plan, long-term plan. This is the Braden Surprenant Show just getting underway. We're live and local each and every Sunday morning on San Diego's #1 sports station, 97.3 The Fan.
Do you want to go out for a great meal that doesn't cost a fortune? Hey, Chris Ello here. Try Spiro's Mediterranean cuisine. Spiro's menu filled with fresh and healthy options, and they're all reasonably priced. Quality bites, family-friendly, and the taste of Mediterranean awesomeness. Bring your appetite to Spiro's and leave with money in your pocket. Spiro's in Coronado at the ferry landing, downtown La Jolla for dining, takeout,
Welcome back to the Braden Surprenant Show, live and local each every Sunday morning, talking Padres baseball, talking trade deadline stuff from last week, kind of recapping last week. Good week for the Padres last week. In the front office, with what the Padres had acquired, with the Padres sweeping the Dodgers in a 2-game series, winning the season series against L.A., and putting themselves now in a good spot at 60 and 52, half game above the third wild card spot as the second wild card team, a game behind Atlanta for the top wild card spot. And not to be forgotten, 4.5 games back behind LA in the National League West. If they would have won if they would have won Friday's game after the A's did the Lord's work and beat the Dodgers, you could have been 3.5 games back, but, missed opportunity. The Rockies are just such a thorn in the Padres' side. Such a thorn in the Padres' side is really remarkable. Their biggest kryptonite. I mean, if the Rockies could play the Padres all the time, they'd be in a playoff position. They'd be in a playoff spot with how great success they have had against San Diego. Hopefully that changes today. Hopefully the Padres go out there and destroy Colorado on a Sunday and then get ready for Pittsburgh. A Paul Skeens-less Pittsburgh this week. Paul Skeens pitching today against Arizona. So you miss him the first time around. There's a good possibility you miss him when he comes to San Diego. And if you could play the Pirates 6 times and not have to face Paul Skeens once, it's not who you play, it's when you play him. And that would be a great time to play the Pittsburgh Pirates. Pirates, as of right now, 56 and 54. They're 6 games out of the division in the Central, 2.5 out of the wild card. They're battling with Arizona right now. I don't necessarily know if either of those really matter. I think the Pirates beating Arizona is probably more beneficial to San Diego just because you get to play the Pirates 6 times. And Arizona, you only get 3 more matchups against, and you have to win. You have to win that series. That is a must-win series because tiebreakers are in effect, and you're currently 5-5 against the Snakes. Got to be able to win that season series. You already won the season series against Los Angeles. You still have an opportunity. You're 1 game behind the Giants in your season series with them. You're tied with the Diamondbacks. I don't even want to look at the Rockies one. I'm sure it's not very good. Padres and Rockies this year. Padres are. San Diego is 3-6 against Colorado. So Padres are going to have to win the rest of the games against the Rockies if they want to win the series, the season series against Colorado. 3-6. That might not be updated. Maybe they're 4-6 because I think they only play the Rockies one more time, if I'm not mistaken. Padres play the Rockies one more. They get 3 more games against. They got 4 games left against Colorado. 9. Yeah, no, that'd be it. They have to win literally the next 4 games in a row against Colorado if they want to win the season series against the Rockies, which they have only done, I think, like twice in the last couple of years. I mean, it's honestly, if you want to look how much the Rockies have been a thorn in the Padres' side, go through Baseball Reference, start looking like year by year, because you always forget they have had the Padres number for years now. For years. This year, they went 3-10 against San Francisco. I mean, look at the Rockies against everybody else. 2-5 against Arizona. 0-3 against the Cubs. They went 1-6 against Cincinnati. They're 2-5 against L.A., 0-3 against Miami. They split with Milwaukee. 1-2 against the Mets. 2-4 against the Phillies. 2-4 against the Pirates. 3-10 against the Giants. 2-2 against St. Louis. 1-2 against Washington. 17-20 against the American League. They have one series, or should I say one team, that they have a winning record against this season. Colorado. It's the Padres. They're 6-3 against San Diego. They're either 500 or worse against everybody else in Major League Baseball, with the exception of the San Diego Padres, they're 6-3 against them. It's such a cruel joke for Padres fans. I haven't looked at that yet. I just looked at it in real time. I'm gonna go through it one more time. The Rockies are 2-5 against Arizona, 0-3 against the Cubs, 1-6 against Cincinnati, 2-5 against LA, 0-3 against Miami, 2-2 against Milwaukee, 1-2 against the Mets, 2-4 against the Phillies, 2-4 against the Pirates, 3-10 against the Giants, 2-2 against St. Louis, 1-2 against Washington, 17-20 against the American League. There's 6-3 against the Padres. You laugh to prevent yourself from crying at that. That's amazing. I want to get to your phone calls today, 833-288-0973, 833-288-0973. Let's go out to our loyal listener out on the East Coast, Mitch in New Jersey, joining us. Mitch, what's going on?
How you doing, Brandon? Good show. Looks like the Rockies got their number.
Yeah.
It was a good pickup, especially for the bullpen. I wish they could have gotten a hitter and it wouldn't have cost much. I don't know what the Yankees gave up for Jazz, but I heard it wasn't too much. But something else, I hope we don't deplete hope we didn't deplete our farm system, because you don't want to be weak for the future. You want to just drafting and recruiting good players and hoping they keep that up. And I'm hoping you see what Soto's doing with I think he's an MVP, Mr. Aaron Judge. Kind of reminds me of Dave Winfield, an old Padre there. Probably was drafted in 3 sports. I'm not sure, but he could play any other sport. He's in trouble. I hope next year. I think we'll see a bat. I wish I got a bat this year, but next year I think we should go for Soto. I think the price has to come down. Baseball has to be. Let them go. Let them coincide. Let them work together, cahoots. Let them be cahoots. They have to get these salaries down. So maybe I think what do you think we're getting? Soto.
Mitch, I'm losing your phone call a little bit, but I hear the Soto talk there. I mean, I'd love to have Juan Soto back in the team, but I don't know what the Padres' finances are like with that. I think it's a very interesting topic. There's a couple of things that I want to point out that Mitch brought up. One of them is the farm system. I'm going to get to that in our next break. And I think a lot of that has to be with what A.J. Preller has said. And honestly, I think you have to take his word for what he said in his post-trade deadline press conference. Aside from a couple of things, one thing he said was when A.J. Cassaville asked him about what the rules are for all these players that he had acquired, he was like, why don't you come down and talk with me and Schulte? We're about to figure that out in about an hour. Come on down and join us. We'll talk it out together. And then he points to Kevin Hayes and he goes, not you, Kevin, though. You have to stay. You can't come down with us. AJ's cool. No, you can't. No, Kevin, stay there. Don't come down with us. I was dying listening to the press conference at that. I thought that was so funny. He said something about the farm system that I thought was very important. And I think it really explains why I've evaluated this trade deadline as I have. I'll talk about that when we come back. What did A.J. Preller say in his press conference that I think Padres fans should really take to heart and honestly kind of trust him with? I'll tell you next on the Braden Surprenant Show, live and local each every Sunday morning from 8 to 10 on San Diego's #1 sports station, 97.3 The Fan.
ball game on. Man on the porch singing baritone. 10-line leads to that gentle place between a collarbone and a stone cold face. Doc and boys all say goodbye to the women that they swear are gonna.
Welcome back to the Braden Surprenant Show, live and local each and every Sunday morning. Got some Padres baseball coming up this afternoon. 1:10 start at Petco Park, as the Padres will take on the Rockies for the final time of this series. Sam Levitt will have the EcoWater SoCal Padres pregame show coming up at 12:10 p.m. Pacific time. Padres baseball at 1:10. Postgame show after that, and then we'll get you ready for our shows coming up this week on the talk shows, as the Padres will have an off day tomorrow and 3 games against Pittsburgh on the road before going to Miami and then coming back home to take on the Pittsburgh Pirates. I talked about the trade deadline and what it means for or at least I mentioned that I was going to talk about the trade deadline for the Padres and how it impacts the team moving forward. When looking at the Padres trades that they had brought in, they brought in all arms, right? They brought in Hoeing and Scott from Miami. They brought in Jason Adam from Tampa, and they brought in Martin Perez from Pittsburgh. They also got a 29-year-old AAA baseball player, center fielder from the Yankees, who's now down in El Paso. But with all the moves that the Padres made, they made themselves a lot better. They made the Major League club a lot better. Did they part ways with a lot of potential great prospects in the future? Yes. And I talked about this on my show last week about certain teams' abilities to develop certain talents. And the Padres notoriously have not been one of those teams that have produced many talents of their farm system. They'll sit there and tell you about Fernando and Jackson Merrill and ignore all the other players that have gone on to other organizations that have done better in the other organizations developing than in the Padres' current organization. I mean, the stats speak for themselves in terms of like the last time that the Padres produced a starting pitcher through their farm system. I guess you could say Cal Quantrill, who they are going against now, today, for the Colorado Rockies. But they haven't necessarily been the greatest at developing the talent. They have been phenomenal at acquiring talent. But they have had issues with Dylan Lesko. They've had issues with Robbie Snelling. They've had some setbacks, and they have felt the need, they felt comfortable with giving them to other organizations to develop themselves. And so my thing is here, like, I don't think this trade, and I talked about it last week, specifically with the Adam trade. If Dylan Lesko turns into a great player for Miami or Tampa, whatever it was. I think it was Tampa. If Dylan Lesko turns into a great player for Tampa Bay because they fixed all of the problems that he has had, coming back from Tommy John, not being able to locate a fastball, some say that's the last to come when it comes to Tommy John surgery and bouncing back from it. But the Tampa Bay Rays are inheriting a project. The Tampa Bay Rays are a team that is notoriously good or notoriously great at fixing problems and finding players and turning them into really good players. They're great at developing. So I don't think it would be fair to say if Dylan Lesko did well for Tampa Bay that he was going to do well for San Diego. I mean, he could have potentially gotten worse as his time progressed with the Padres. It's such a unique situation in sports, especially in Major League Baseball at trades, with how teams develop guys in different ways. And how we just always assume that if the Padres didn't trade away player X, that player would have been just as good on the Padres as he was on the team that he is currently on. That could be true. That could not be true. You don't know. I mean, you're playing the guessing game and you're playing the make-believe game all the time. So for the Padres prospects that they had sent away, they have felt, and this is what A.J. Preller said in his press conference, they had felt that they have players coming up the ranks that are better, that we're pushing the guys near the top. And I think you could say what you want. I think you need to take prospect rankings with a grain of salt because everybody evaluates players differently. All the teams evaluate players differently. All these media sites, because again, they're media sites. I mean, they could talk to scouts all the time, and they can even employ former scouts, but there's different ways that teams value and look at players that fit their organization. And so AJ said in his press conference last week that he felt comfortable with the players that he had coming up. And those players being really good players when they evaluated the value of the guys that they were sending away. And you could say that. I think it's an easy way to save face at trade deadlines when you give up what a lot of people thought was a big package to acquire bullpen help. But in reality, you have to take his word for it because they're the ones evaluating for their organization. And to be honest with you, I mean, you could say what you want. You can say what you want about A.J. Preller and his inability to make a major league team, right? That's been the biggest knock, right? He's made the playoffs twice. One of them was a shortened season. If the Padres do not make the playoffs this year, which I think they will make the playoffs, if they don't make the playoffs this year, A.J. Preller in a 10-year span would have made the playoffs 2 times. I think a lot of the criticisms that A.J. has received have been fair criticisms. He has been the general manager and the president of baseball now for the Padres for a very long time. And the results speak for themselves. I think the job he has done this year has been phenomenal based on the deck of cards that he has been dealt, based on the budgetary restraints that he has. I don't think there's really any arguing against that for this year. But again, I bring up all the negatives just to say, take all of the negatives about A.J. Preller. The one thing will always be true, and his biggest positive is the guy knows how to find talent. He is elite at acquiring and finding talent, wherever it may be, whatever country it may be in, whatever region of the United States it might be in, whether it be a college player or a high school player. The guy finds dudes, and he loves finding superstar players. So when a general manager like AJ says at the press conference, and again, I think there's a lot of eyewash in those press conferences all the time. But when a guy like AJ says, we like the players that are not on those top 30 lists that certain media outlets put together, and we like our guys pushing forward, you have to trust what he's saying. This is a time where you sit and his track record speaks for itself. Now, whether or not they can develop those players is a different story. They have not been the greatest at that. If he said during his press conference, hey, look, those guys moved on, but we could turn a lot of the players below them into studs, I would have been like, all right, dude, come on. Who are you trying to gaslight here? But he didn't do that. He said, we like the players that we have coming up through the ranks. I mean, every time that A.J. Preller does a draft, I mean, he loads up the farm system. This is the same conversation that we had when the Padres acquired Juan Soto. How are the Padres going to overcome sending away all these players to Washington? And you know what happened immediately after that conversation happened? Again, it was C.J. Abrams and James Wood, and you go down the list. Those are the two headliners, obviously. James Wood's come back down to earth. C.J. Abrams has been good. He has been great. Mackenzie Gore has been okay, right? I mean, these are not guys that are just phenomenal. I know C.J. Abrams made the All-Star game. I think he's done pretty good. But the thing is, as soon as those guys left, you know who immediately became like this phenomenal player? He got bumped up naturally, but then he was going on a tear, and all of a sudden the farm system filled out right behind. It was Jackson Merrill. They immediately made Jackson Merrill the number one prospect in the Padres organization. And I was like, wow, we're really pushing this guy really quick. I mean, he's like, I think he was like 19 or something like that, 18 or 19. And you're like, really? It's just automatically, all right, now this guy's a stud. It didn't make any sense, but it everything backfilled behind him. All the players that you traded during this deadline and that group of players that I mentioned at the beginning of the show that were in the top 30 prospects for the organization when camp broke out of spring training. Those 12 of the 15 that are no longer with the organization, those guys were not part of, and the majority of them were not part of the organization's top 15, 20 list before the C.J. Abrams trade. That was 2 years ago. None of those guys were even part of the equation. If you would have sent any of those guys away, if they were even on the team, which I don't even know if most of them were even part of the organization, for Juan Soto at the time, you would have been like, who cares? I mean, these prospect rankings don't make any sense. David Bednar, who's an all-star closer for the Pirates, now whether or not he still has that role over there is a different story. But he's an all-star closer for the Pirates. People were upset about, a couple of years ago, the Padres traded him away. Said the same thing about Jack Sawinski, right? I mean, that guy's not even with them anymore. He was the 30th best prospect in the top 30 prospect rankings. I mean, it's just, it's one man's, it's a couple people's opinions on stuff. I've talked about my stuff all the time. I've talked about the rankings and stuff like that. It's a projection of what you think the players are going to be at the major league level. And if the projections were good, those guys would be in front offices and everything. They're just projections. Can the Padres win the division? Why it's not that hard, but does it matter? I'll talk about that when we come back. Final hour of the Braden Surprenant Show. We're here each and every Sunday morning from 8 to 10, live and local, talking Padres baseball, getting closer to college football, the NFL, which we will be discussing that a lot in the fall with some high school football as well. Just finished our first 3 days of practice over at Cathedral. Got an off day today. It's nice. It's going to be great. Got to retool, reshape, and get geared up again for another long week of practicing, and then August 16th, strap it up against El Camino for a scrimmage, and then it's against Mater Dei Chula Vista, Mater Dei Catholic in Game 1 down at their place, and we're ready to go. High school football is back practicing. College football is back practicing. The NFL has already had a game in the Hall of Fame game. Now, it wasn't a full game, but they've already played a game. And football is back. We'll be talking a lot of football on this show during the football season, but it's all local all the time. We always talk San Diego sports first, local stories, everything. Most of the time it's the Padres, obviously, but a lot better than the weekend noise, as mentioned in the open, on national programs. And I'd say national programs are not good, but they're not, they pertain to us more times than not. So thanks again for making our day a part of yours. I really appreciate it. If you're watching on YouTube, give us a like on the YouTube page. Smash the like button. Give us a follow. You can subscribe to me on YouTube at B_SURP. I broadcast on there all the time. B-SURP. You could subscribe to 97 Through the Fan on YouTube as well at 97 Through the Fan SD. Plus follow us on social media. You can follow me on social media at B_SURP. Follow me on X, follow me on Instagram, follow me on TikTok, all of those platforms. Smash the like button, as Junior says. Best way to spend your Sunday morning. I wish it was a longer segment. Well, I appreciate that, Junior. Sometimes I don't want to be here all day on a Sunday, but I appreciate you joining the show each and every Sunday. Thanks to all of you in the YouTube chat. We're going to take your phone calls, too, if you want to weigh in. I asked the question going to break, and I'm going to get into it after I get some of your phone calls. The Padres' likelihood of winning the division. Do we think the Padres can win the division? That was something that's not necessarily on the radar before the season has started. Dodgers signed Shohei Ohtani. It's like, oh, wow. Rich keep getting richer. Keep acquiring more players that are superstars, but they have been taxed with injuries. They have been taxed with a lot of things that they have had to deal with. The lineup that they have had against the Padres the last 2 games here at Petco Park are just not Dodger lineups that you're used to. I'm shedding a tear just talking about it in terms of the Padres' sake. But at the same time, the Padres have pulled within 4.5 games of the division lead. And it's August 4th. In 2023, on August 4th, which was a Friday last year, the Padres were 10 games out of first place. The Giants are right there on the Dodgers' tail. They were 3 games back. The Padres were 10 games back. They are currently 4.5 games back. They could have been 3.5 games back if they would have handled business against the Rockies, but that's neither here nor there. I think they're in striking distance. I really do. And we'll see how it plays out. I mean, the Dodgers' upcoming schedule, and I didn't even put it on my sheet for this Hunt to October because I was like, they still got some time to do and some time to put things together. But their upcoming schedule, I mean, the Dodgers, after they play Oakland, they got to play Philly again. Now, Philly is struggling. The Philadelphia Phillies are struggling. They are 2-8 in their last 10. They've lost 6 in a row. Had a 5-0 lead last night in Seattle, blew it, and ended up losing in extra innings. Controversial final at bat by Mitch Haniger in the 10th. Guy should have punched out 3 times, ends up walking with the bases loaded. Their lead over Atlanta is now only 5 games. So despite Atlanta being left for dead with everybody being hurt, they're 5 games out of the division. And the Padres are 4.5 games out of the division. But as I mentioned with the Dodgers, and Ramon Scott in the chat says the Phillies are 4-13 in their last 17 games. Rough. And as I mentioned, they are struggling mightily. Dodgers' upcoming schedule. After they play this game today in Oakland, they got 3 against Philly, best team in the National League. So both L.A. and Philly are struggling, so something's got to give in L.A. this weekend. Then they got Pittsburgh battling for a playoff spot, which, by the way, since the Padres don't have to deal with Paul Skeens this week in Pittsburgh, the Pirates get to throw Paul Skeens against the Dodgers. That's the greatest week outcome you could possibly have for Padres this week. You don't have to face Paul Skeens, and the Dodgers do. It's great. It's phenomenal. And then guess what? If he pitches against the Dodgers the next weekend, he won't be pitching against, you guessed it, the San Diego Padres the following week. It'd be great. It'd be great. Pirates go Arizona, San Diego, LA, San Diego. Back to the Dodgers. They got 1 game against Oakland today. Again, they lost on Friday. They won last night 10-0. They got 3 against Philly, 3 against the Pittsburgh Pirates, 3 at Milwaukee, division leader, 3 at St. Louis, battling for a playoff spot, 3 versus Seattle, division leader, 3 against Tampa, over 500, 3 against Baltimore, best team, one of the best teams in the American League, 4 at Arizona, playoff team, battling for a playoff team, 2 against the Halos, who they split with last time, 3 against the Guardians, the other best team in the American League, 3 against Chicago, 3 at Atlanta, 3 against Miami, a little bit of a break, 3 against the Rockies, 3 against the Padres again, and then 3 more against the Rockies. That is rough. That is a rough schedule. That is a way more difficult schedule than the Padres schedule. Padres have 50 games left. They get to play the Rockies 3 more times after today, so 4 times total. They got the White Sox 3 times. They got games against Miami, Detroit, San Francisco. They do got to play the Pirates twice, but the level of team that the Dodgers are playing compared to the Padres in the final 2 months is a lot different, and it really opens the door. Let's get back to your phone calls, 833-288-0973, 833-288-0973. Let's go out to East County, where hopefully it's not too hot yet. It's still cool from the marine layer, even though it burned off most of the time in East County probably already. Out to El Cajon, where Brandon's standing by. Brandon, what's going on?
Hey, good morning. No, there's no morning overcast out here. Not too hot yet, though.
Oh, that's good. I'm going to stay cool out there. It's going to probably heat up later on this afternoon.
Yeah, it will. The 7-game winning streak got me back watching them again, and they've been playing good baseball. I think trying to beat the Dodgers in the division should be one of their. That's maybe not as good as winning the World Series, but they got a shot to beat the Dodgers, and that should be what they want to do. Just go out and win. And also, this Jackson Merrill kid, he's a real baseball player. I hope that these long-term contracts don't, make it impossible for the Padres to keep him. I'd rather have Jackson Merrill on the team than any of the big 3.
Jackson Merrill's a great player, and that's why I keep bringing up, and Brandon, I appreciate the phone call. That's why I keep bringing up, a couple of months ago, that if you think he's going to continue at this streak, and I don't know why he wouldn't, and we're in August now. This is the August lull that you're supposed to get with any type of rookie. We'll see if he starts to come back down to earth. But the way that he is such a good contact hitter, and he's a great player in general in terms of just a baseball player, I think that's going to hold the test of time. And the thing is if you're going to bring him on full time and you want him to be part of your future, you have to sign him as soon as possible to a deal that he cannot refuse. You have to pull a Braves deal. Otherwise, he's going to get too expensive. You're not going to be able to pay for him. You're going to have to let him walk after 6 years. So I wouldn't be surprised if A.J. Preller and company are working on that behind the scenes. 833-288-0973, 833-288-0973. Let's go out to Spring Valley, where William's standing by. William, what's going on?
Hey, good morning. Yeah, I have a couple of questions, or maybe it's one question. Mark, question, Tatis, question mark.
You kind of cut out there for a second. What was your question?
Yeah, I'm wondering when we're going to see Darvish, Tatis, and Musgrove, and I'm also wondering specifically what the heck is going on with Darvish, if anybody really knows.
Well, a lot of that stuff is very private, and William, I appreciate the phone call. To me, here's my thing with Darvish, and this is why I don't know why you need to really worry about what's going on in his life. For a couple of reasons. One, it's his personal life. He could do what he wants. I mean, they got to deal with stuff and let him deal with it, and it's fine. We don't need an explanation of why he's missing. And the other thing, too, you're not paying him. I mean, so it's really not, like, hurting you at all. I mean, he's just not there. You know what? I'm not going to be with the team right now. I got to deal with some things, and that's totally fine. If they get him back, great. Here's the thing. He's got to be back before September, whatever it is, when they lock the playoff rosters, or you lock the ability to be on a playoff roster. I don't know if that impacts him too much just because of his amount of time played. It might be a thing where you're adding somebody that wasn't on your team. But, for him, I mean, you have no idea when he's coming back. He's dealing with something. He's got to deal with it. His family's dealing with it. I'm not asking any more questions on that. It's fine. He could just do what he could do his thing. It's a personal matter. Joe Musgrove, William, is going to pitch in a rehab assignment this week up in Fresno for the Lake Elsinore Storm. And that was the latest report we had from Jeff Sanders, I'm pretty sure. I need to see exactly. He was going to go to San Antonio and play, but his flight got canceled. So instead, they are moving Joe to Fresno, and he will actually pitch today. So Musgrove's back pitching today for Lake Elsinore. He'll be pitching in Fresno for the Storm. We'll see how that goes. We'll have a report on that probably tomorrow. But Joe said, players are always overzealous about things like this, but Joe said that he was expecting to pitch next week, which would be this week, upcoming. So we'll see if we can get Joe back there. The last one is Fernando. Now, Fernando's a little bit different. Now, Fernando, they're waiting for his bone to fully heal, his femur. Because if his bone does not fully heal and it's still a little bit, banged up, if you will, for layman's terms, that could potentially continue to re-injure, and then the setbacks go right back to where he started. So for him, they're just waiting on a bone to officially fully heal. He's still been doing some baseball work with limitation. I know he's been able to throw. We've seen the video of it. But that's kind of the latest on all three of those particular players. All three of those particular players could come back. All three of those particular players could not come back. I think it's more positive on the Joe Musgrove and Fernando Tatis Jr. front on those things. But if you were to add any of those three players, any combination of those three players or all three of those guys, it'd be like adding another trade after the deadline, which would be great. And I appreciate the phone call from William in Spring Valley. Jay in Escondido. Haven't talked to Jay in a long time. Jay, what's going on?
Hey, I have maybe an unpopular question, but I know he's a good fielder, but I'd like to see them put Bogarts back at short. I think Kim is really a big liability as a bat, because if he doesn't walk, he strikes out. Batting 220, doesn't it seem like we could just put Arias or Cronenworth at second? Of course, one of them can play first, and then you can get Solano in the batting average more. What is your take on that?
I've been saying that, Jay, for the last couple of weeks. I mean, I really like that idea. I mean, you brought Xander in to be a shortstop when you brought him in, and then after 1 year, you decided to move him to second base for Ha-Seong Kim, which, at the time, it made kind of sense because Kim, right, was a better defensive shortstop than Xander Bogaerts. But at the same time, Kim was on an expiring contract. So why cater to a guy that's not going to be on your team at the end of the year, and instead the guy that you have for 11 years under contract, or when you signed him 11 years under contract, you got him for another 10, 9, whatever years it is, you decide to move him to second base that he's not comfortable with and accelerate that process when your shortstop's going to leave at the end of the year because there's no guarantee you're going to re-sign him. I agree with the hitting perspective. Now, Craig and I disagree on how to build a lineup. He wants more defense. I think you should have your best 9 bats in there. To me, a lineup with your best 9 bats includes Donovan Solano, and it includes Xander Bogaerts and Jake Cronenworth and Luis Arraez and Manny Machado, and finding that in the infield, having Solano DH, having Arraez play first base, Cronenworth at second, Bogaerts at shortstop, and Machado at third. I'm going to tell you right now, I think that's a really good lineup that the Padres can roll out. And we've seen Solano come off the bench. He's a good bat off the bench. But, I think your best 9 guys include him in the starting lineup more times than not. And we'll see how much longer this will continue. I mean, you mentioned it. Kim's hitting .224 on the season, and he has not gotten a hit all weekend. I mean, he's just continuing declining at the plate. I know he walks. He's done a good job walking. So at least he's productive in some way. But Jay, I think that's not as much of an unpopular opinion as you think it is, and I appreciate the phone call. 833-288-0973, 833-288-0973. Is winning the division, does it matter in 2024? Does it matter to you Padres fans if the Padres win the division or not, or do you just want to see them make the playoffs? I'm going to tell you what I think when we come back on the Braden Surprenant Show. Right here, live and local each every Sunday morning from 8 to 10 on San Diego's #1 sports station, 97.3 The Fan. 9:23 on a Sunday morning. Beautiful day out there in America's finest city. It was a nice, cool morning. I'm sure it'll heat up as the built-in marine layer that keeps us nice and cool during most of the summer starts to burn off. I'm Braden Surprenant. It's the Braden Surprenant Show, live and local each every Sunday morning from 8 to 10. If it's your first time tuning in to us, we're here every Sunday talking local Padres, high school, college, everything that's local and nice that revolves around sports in America's finest city. If you're following us on YouTube, thanks again for tuning in. To the 70 people that are on there, be sure to give us a like on the YouTube page. Helps with the algorithm. Be sure to chime in with any of your opinions on what we have to say or what our topics are. We love the fan interaction. We really appreciate that. If you haven't subscribed to us on YouTube, you could do that at my page, at @B_SURP. You could also do it on the 97.3 The Fans page as well at 97.3 The Fan. Follow me on social media at 97 or at BSurp on Twitter, Twitter/X, Instagram, and TikTok at B_SURP. Follow me on there, and we'll try to make more of our days a part of your day. We really appreciate that. Taking some of your phone calls again. I'm asking people, can the Padres win the division? I think the can part is yes. Yes, they can. I am going to answer the question of, in 2024, does it really matter? Does winning the division in Major League Baseball really matter in 2024 with playing everybody in baseball, with expanded playoffs in baseball, and with the fact that the 6th seed in the National League has gone to the World Series the last 2 years since they have put in 6 seeds? Winning the division, does it still matter? I'll talk about that in just a second. I want to get back to the phones. 833-288-0973, 833-288-0973. Let's go over to Clay in the South Bay. Clay, it's been a long time. How you been?
Braden, it's been like forever, but it doesn't mean I don't listen.
Well, I appreciate that.
I've been great, but you know what? I mean, following the Padres, obviously, you know, my fan wagon's always out there, always positive. I do believe that if Kim were to be removed from the lineup and put on the bench, I'd be between myself, but if he shared with Solano the duties of the infield, that'd be fine too. But getting back to Musgrove or Darvish or Tatis coming back, I do agree with you. I mean, it'd be just like getting another trade deadline trade, except you'd get some stronger legs, some stronger arms, and not as much abuse on the body for the season. I do believe, though, Braden, that winning the division does matter. I think you need to go in with as much momentum as you can in the playoffs. But, the 6th seed does go. It's been proven, but I just think being the bridesmaid in the division, there's a time that we got to take it over.
I agree with that part, Clay. I definitely do, and I appreciate the phone call. Be well, Clay, and look forward to talking to you again next week.
All right. We'll talk to you.
I agree to an extent, right? I mean, I think here to me it's a twofold answer. In the grand scheme of things, if the Padres don't win the division but make the playoffs, it's really not that big of a deal. It's really not that big of a deal. Because at the end of the day, like, it doesn't, aside from, now, if you want to talk matchups in the postseason, I think that plays a little bit. If the Padres were to win the division, they'd avoid potentially Atlanta and Philly in the first 2 rounds of the playoffs. If you want to play that game, but at the end of the day, you have to beat somebody good to advance in the playoffs anyway. So whether or not you face the Brewers first or the Phillies second or the Braves first and the Phillies second, Phillies first, whatever. It's actually, you want to play those teams as earlier as possible because beating good teams is easier in smaller amounts of games. I mentioned that before the Padres beat the Dodgers a couple of years ago. I said, look, you don't have to beat them throughout the entire season of 18 times. You just got to beat them 3 times out of 5. That's it. That's all you got to do. I mean, the Phillies waxed you all season. You went 1-5 against Philadelphia, 1-6, one of the two, 1-5. They went 1-5 against Philadelphia. They take 3 out of 5 from them in the playoffs, it doesn't matter, right? So from that perspective, no. I think for this fan base and this organization, I think it does matter to a sense of it's been such a long time since the Padres won the National League West, and the Dodgers have won it so many times. I think that would be a next step in the whole process of trying to be that competitive team in the National League West all the time. And being like those organizations that Peter Seidler wanted this organization to be like. You know, the organizations like St. Louis who are always in it, and the organizations like the Dodgers and Atlanta, and some of the teams specifically in the National League that just always seem like they're in it every single year. And winning the division would give you that boost. Does it impact you really that much in the postseason? I mean, say what you want, maybe about rest time. I think too much rest time could be a problem. But I think from a mindset and a nostalgia and kind of a reward for the fans of everything that they've had to go through, you know, the last decade plus as Padres fans, I think the Padres winning the division would be a gift to the San Diego fans that have been there every single night for the last couple of years and have packed that place and have set all those attendance records. That would be a big gift to them. You know, in the grand scheme of things, does it really matter? Not really. I mean, everybody's playing for a World Series. But I think from that mentality perspective, I think it's great. And they're only 4.5 games back. I went through the Dodgers schedule. It is brutal. And the Padres match up well with their schedule. And just in the sense of missing Paul Skeens this week, the Dodgers having to see Paul Skeens this weekend, and then seeing the Pirates again and not have to face Paul. Means he will be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 against against the Dodgers on Saturday. 1, 2, 3, 4. You miss them twice, unless they move things around with an off day, and the Dodgers have to see him. That's great news. That helps the cause. It's not who you play; it's when you play them. The Padres and Dodgers both have to play the Pirates this week. The Padres don't have to face Paul Skeens. The Dodgers do. It's a difference. That's a major difference in playing some of these teams. 833-288-0973. 833-288-0973. Let's go out to San Marcos. Phil wants to weigh in on the Braden Surprenant show. Phil, what's going on?
Hey, how's it going, buddy? I want to talk about, remember during the trade deadline, there were some people out there crying about why we didn't go after any starters. My theory is this. I think the Padres are secretly holding out that Musgrove and or Darvish are going to come back. And if you only get one of those guys, think about the playoffs. You would have Michael King, Dylan Cease, and either Musgrove and or Darvish. Hey, I'll ride the playoffs with those three guys as my starters and that bullpen on the back end. Let me know what you think. I'll take your answer on the radio.
Well, Phil, appreciate the phone call. Thanks again for calling in. It's kind of true. I mean, it drastically changes the landscape of how you attack a playoff series. Now, with the off days that they have built into the playoffs, travel days and everything else, you only really need like 2 or 3 starters in the postseason to make it through. And with the bullpen that the Padres have, you can survive with 2 to 3 starters. And with that, if Darvish and Joe don't come back, you're still in a pretty good spot. I mean, you don't necessarily want Martin Perez pitching in the postseason. I thought he did well last night, and we'll see how he does as he progresses. Matt Waldron's done a really good job. I don't know if I want to necessarily pitch him in a playoff game, but I think if you pitch him, it's not that bad. But if you add some of these players, now the thing with Michael King is, he's already gone over the amount of innings the most innings he's ever thrown in a year. So I don't know how much of that is being played with the Padres as well. But if you add Darvish and Musgrove, you go Cease, Darvish, Musgrove. I mean, that's how you would formulate a playoff rotation, and you probably wouldn't even need Michael King. And then if you need a fourth guy, it's Michael King. And then everybody else is all hands on deck in the bullpen, and your bullpen is just built up. I think the Padres knew that they had enough starting pitching to make it through the postseason. But the only time that they're thinking about probably starting pitching is the end of the season, because you want to try to give Michael King some rest with his arm. You want to try to, space out some of these other guys in the rotation, and you need to build up innings, you need to get players to eat up innings so you don't destroy your bullpen that, again, you built for the postseason. That's a postseason bullpen. That's not necessarily a make the playoffs bullpen. You can't be using those guys every single night, but you can use them every single day in the playoffs. But you got to get there first. So that's why they were kind of looking at starting pitching. The starting pitching market was ridiculous. I mean, it was ridiculous what teams were asking for. And I think that's why a lot of teams decided to pivot to the bullpen. I think the Padres have enough starting pitching to make it run through the playoffs, and loading up in the bullpen is a different way to accomplish that. I talked about the Dodgers, talked about the Padres chasing them down. I think winning the division would be a nice little upgrade for them. I think it'd be great for the fan base. Overall, it's probably not the end-all, be-all. You could do some damage when you get to the postseason. We're going to take our final break. When we come back, got a lot to talk about in terms of the Padres, but also we got a list. Checking it twice. Anybody that's interested in college football, the best college football games of 2024 coming up. We also got your power rankings for the MLB. Some key questions remaining after 2024 MLB trade deadline. All coming up next in a quick segment on the Braden Surprenant Show right here on San Diego's #1 sports station, 97.3 The Fan. Final segment of the Braden Surprenant Show. We're live, we're local each and every Sunday morning from 8 to 10. 97.3 The Fan, San Diego's #1 sports station. Home of the San Diego Padres flagship. Ecowater SoCal Padres pregame show with Sam Levitt getting underway at 12:10 p.m. Pacific time. Padres start at 1:10 against Colorado Rockies, try to take 2 out of 3. I mentioned this earlier in the show. It's pretty wild. The San Diego Padres have to win the next 4 games against Colorado to win the season series against Colorado. They are 3-6 against the Rockies this year. The Colorado Rockies do not have a winning record against any team in baseball, with the exception of the San Diego Padres. Colorado, and I went through this. I'm gonna go through it again because it's baffling that this is the case. I mentioned Chris Ello's tweet earlier. It was hilarious because it's just baseball. The Colorado Rockies pitching this season. This is going into last night's game. Colorado Rockies pitching this season at Petco Park. 4-0, which is now 4-1. 2.25 ERA. Everywhere else, 37-70 with a 5.59 ERA. It's crazy how good the Rockies are against the San Diego Padres. I'm glad the Padres won last night. I mean, that was a whew. Thank God that was over. Colorado's records against teams this year. Now, they don't really carry it against the American League because you only play American League teams 3 times. So overall against the American League, the Rockies are 17-20. So obviously they probably have won some series in there against some American League teams. But in the National League, listen to this. The Rockies are 2-5 against Arizona. They've yet to play the Braves, which is remarkable. We are on August 4th. And there are 2 matchups. Oh, actually 3. There's a couple. There's like 3 or 4 matchups that haven't even happened yet this year, which is crazy. Arizona has not played Milwaukee yet. Atlanta has not played Colorado yet. Chicago hasn't played Washington yet. And the Padres haven't played Pittsburgh yet. San Francisco hasn't played Milwaukee yet either. Milwaukee hasn't played 2 teams yet. And they're going to load up on the Diamondbacks and the Giants. It's so funny how this schedule is nowadays. But anyway, back to Colorado. 2-5 against Arizona. Haven't played Atlanta yet. 0-3 against the Cubs. 1-6 against the Reds. 2-5 against the Dodgers. 0-3 against Miami. 2-2 against Milwaukee. 1-2 against New York. 2-4 against Philly. 2-4 against Pittsburgh. 3-10 against San Francisco. 2-2 against St. Louis, and 1-2 against Washington. San Diego Padres, though, they're 6-3 against. It's remarkable. I can't believe it every time I see it. Today's starting pitching matchup between the Rockies and Padres. Matt Waldron going for San Diego. The Rockies will counter with Cal Quantrill. Former Padre, former Guardian, now Rocky. Very popular name at the trade deadline, ends up staying on the Colorado Rockies, which goes into what are the Rockies doing? I don't know. I guess they could be said the same with the Giants fans. What are the Giants doing? Matt Waldron, 6-9 with a 3.89 ERA. Cal Quantrill is 7-7 with a 4.50 ERA. Padres 60-52. Rockies 41-71. Again, the Padres need to win their next 4 against Colorado if they want to win the season series against the Rockies. It would be very Padres, by the way, to win the series against LA. They have the ability to do it against Arizona. They're currently tied at 5, but if they take 2 out of 3 from Arizona at the end of the season, they would win the season series against Arizona. And with a couple of games left against San Francisco, they have to play the Giants 3 times here and 3 times in San Fran, trailing by 1 game. I mean, there's a real possibility that the Padres win the season series against every team in the National League West with the exception of the Rockies. Which, if the Padres are able to catch the Los Angeles Dodgers, and let's just say they hang the Western Division Champs banner over the Western Metal Supply Company building, which they haven't done since '06, and the Padres have winning records against every team in the division but the Rockies, I'll LOL, because that is just so baseball. Let's talk about the hunt for October for a second. Atlanta currently has the top spot in the wild card. They're 60-50. They got a 1.5 game lead on Arizona, who's the 3 team in the wild card. They have a 1-game lead on San Diego, who is the 2 spot, they as being the Atlanta Braves. So it's Atlanta, San Diego, Arizona, the 3 teams in the National League wild card. Padres are 60-52, half game above Arizona, who's 59-52. Last spot in the wild card standings. New York Mets are a half game behind Arizona. They're 58-52. St. Louis 2 games back of Arizona at 57-54. Pittsburgh 2.5 back at 56-54. And then the 2 teams that are under 500, the Giants and the Reds, they're 4.5 games out and 5.5 games out, respectively. In terms of the remaining schedule, Atlanta's got 52 games left. New York's got 52 left. Padres have 50. Arizona 51. Pittsburgh 52. St. Louis 51. Padres schedule is there. Everybody keeps saying how it's like a more favorable schedule. The Padres still have to play 31 games against teams above 500 and 19 games against teams below 500. Starting earlier this week, when I had these totals, the only other team that had more games against teams above 500 than the Padres, actually, or 2, was Arizona with 39 games above 500, playing teams against teams that are above 500, and St. Louis, who has 38 more games against teams above 500. Atlanta's got 25 games left against teams above 500. New York's got 25 games left against teams above 500. Those are the 2 lowest of the group. Both of them have to do makeup games mixed in. But again, with some of those, some of those are misleading. Like San Francisco is technically a team that is below 500 in the standings, but they're competing for a playoff spot. So, as in the final 50 games for the San Diego Padres, again, it's been said that they have one of the easiest schedules remaining because I guess they play the White Sox 3 times, and they got the Rockies 4 times total. But out of the teams that are below 500 that the Padres play, they have Miami, Colorado, and Chicago. Those are all teams that are awful. Detroit's okay, but they're below 500. And the Giants are competing for a playoff spot below 500. Other than that, they got the Pirates, the Twins, the Mets, the Cardinals, the Rays, who are still above 500, Seattle, Houston, Arizona, and Los Angeles. It's not that much easier. I don't know why people think it's like this easy schedule to finish up the season. The Padres are gonna have to grind through this thing. I will say this: the Los Angeles Dodgers schedule. We talking about if the Padres can catch them or not? Their schedule is rough. It is rough. The Dodgers down the stretch, and really starting this week. Tomorrow they're going to play Philly at home. So the Dodgers got 3 against Philly and then 3 against Pittsburgh on a homestand. They will go to Milwaukee and St. Louis for a road trip. So far, 4 teams battling for playoff spots. Seattle, who's battling for a division championship right now. Tampa Bay, who again is still above 500. Baltimore, who is them and Cleveland keep bouncing back and forth on the best team in the American League, but currently I think it might be Cleveland. It doesn't matter. The Dodgers play both of them anyway. They got Baltimore. Then they got Arizona for 4. And Arizona is also a team in the division that has a winning record against the Dodgers. They're 5-4 against LA this year. And Arizona's a half game behind the Padres. That's a big 4-game series for both the Diamondbacks and the Dodgers to finish up August. September, you got 2 games against the Angels. Who knows who's going to be playing for them at that point in time. 3 against the Guardians. So if Baltimore's not the best team in the American League, the Guardians are. And it is the Guardians right now. You have to play both of them if you're Los Angeles. Chicago Cubs, they're okay, not very great. I guess that's a break. Atlanta on the road for 4 in the middle of September. Atlanta's now competing for a division spot. They're only 5 games out. Philly has played so poor in their last 17 games that their 9+ game cushion on Atlanta has evaporated overnight. The only break the Dodgers have are their last 3 series. They play the Rockies, the Padres, which is not a break for them, and the Rockies again. 6 games against the Rockies, 3 against the Padres in their final 9 games of the season. But before that, again, rough. Philly, Pittsburgh, Milwaukee, St. Louis, Seattle, Tampa, Baltimore, Arizona, Angels, Cleveland, Chicago Cubs, Atlanta, Miami, Colorado, San Diego, Colorado. And the Padres are what? 4.5 games out. The Padres might not have, again, they keep saying it's the easiest schedule. One of the easiest schedules. I don't buy it. The other team's supposed to be playing just hellscapes of a schedule. But despite the Padres' schedule maybe not being as easy as we thought it was going to be, it's still a lot easier than the Los Angeles Dodgers schedule down the stretch. Again, it's not who you play, it's when you play them. And right now, a lot of those teams are going to be a tough battle for Los Angeles. Talk about some of the questions, key questions after the deadline. It's kind of be our last thing to talk about here on the Braden Surprenant Show because we're going to sign off here very shortly. The one question that, and this is on ESPN, key questions after the trade deadline, the one question that pertained to the Padres was this. How will the San Diego Padres and Mike Shildt, manager Mike Shildt, deploy his stacked bullpen? They've listed a couple of different ideas, but I think it doesn't seem like a lot of the guys are going to have roles. I think it's going to be, and I think this is the right way to play it, if you got some lefties coming up that are at the top of the lineup for your opponent, I think you go to Tanner Scott immediately. If there's some right-handers coming up, I think you go with Robert Suarez. And if that happens to be in the 9th inning and it's the righties, you go with Suarez. And if it's the lefty, you go with Scott. I think you got to play some matchups here in the bullpen. I really like this Hoeing pickup as well. I think Hoeing could be a nice swingman for San Diego. I think he could be a guy that can eat you innings. I think he's a guy that can help you out in the postseason, be that swing man into the bullpen. The latest addition, I thought Estrada hasn't really been that great the last couple of outings. Hopefully he can get back on track. Again, he's pitching a lot of innings, more so than he is used to. But if you could get Estrada in the 6th, and you can go with Adam in the 7th, and you can go with Scott and Suarez in the 8th and 9th, I mean, you only need 5 innings out of your starting pitcher. A lot of guys can do that on this team. I mean, you're asking, Joe Musgrove to come back and only give you 5 innings? Done. He'll get you 5 innings. No problem. You Darvish coming back, 5 innings, he'll get you 5 innings. No problem. Dylan Cease, he'll get you 5 innings. No problem. Matt Waldron's gotten you 5 innings more times than not. No problem. Michael King, he'll get you 5 innings. No problem. Got to be able to protect that bullpen, though, in these final 2 months of the season before you can start getting into playoff mode. And maybe it starts at the end of September. Maybe it starts second half of September. Maybe it's just in the big series. Maybe you go normal and try to get as many innings as you can out of your starters against some of these inferior opponents, and then you go hard with the bullpen against some of these teams that you have to beat. It'll be interesting to see down the stretch. Big game for the Padres today. Final game at home against Colorado before they will play them one more time for a 3-game series in the Rocky Mountains. And that will be it for the Padres against the Rockies this year. Got to win 4 straight against Colorado if you want to win the season series. Does that matter? Not really. I think it matters for pride more times than not. Starts today with Matt Waldron on the hill going against Cal Quantrill, starting at 1:10 Pacific time. Equal Water SoCal Padres pregame show will be back on the airwaves at 12:10. I'm Braden Surprenant signing off. This is the Braden Surprenant Show, live and local each every Sunday morning from 8 to 10, San Diego's #1 sports station, 97.3 The Fan.